Welcome to Pause Fest Breakthrough Sessions. This is our second last session in a series of 7. We meet every Friday at midday for approximately half an hour, 45 minutes to discuss various different topics with Pause Awards judges, the experts in their field. First of all, I want to welcome to country. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today as well. As I said, today is the second last session, building a product with design thinking. I'm very excited to have Lisa Chesterfield from Deloitte, Angus Tite from Xero, and Brian Williams from Hockey Stick Advisory. If you don't know, we're going to dive today into the world of design thinking, acknowledging its challenges and leveraging its strengths to build exceptional products, understand the multifaceted process of product development, and harness the power of divergence and convergence. Learn about the growth strategies, growth pains, and intentional success planning. Discover strategies for effective partnerships and tips to excel in them. Next week, however, we have the very last session. It's Hire the Right People and Create a Culture with OMD Australia, Sapien, and VY Consulting. All sessions are live online and will include Q&A. So if you have any Q&As, please pop them in a chat. I'll bring that up during the conversation or towards the end. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest speakers today. Start first with Lisa Chesterfield, Director of Strategy, Innovation, and Venture Monitor, Deloitte. Lisa is a director in Deloitte's design-led global innovation practice, a former fashion designer turned human-centered designer, and a passionate entrepreneur. She collaborates with businesses and governments to improve current conditions and invent a promising future, all while positively impacting the quadruple bottom line. Let me add some more people. Angus Tite, product designer at Xero. A few more. Angus is an accomplished design leader with over 20 years of experience designing for a diverse range of businesses. Angus has listened to the unique stories of hundreds of business owners around the world and used these insights to create exceptional product experiences for customers. Welcome, Angus. And finally, Brian Williams, founder of Hockey Stick Advisory. Brian is passionate about helping SaaS businesses and the people within them succeed in realizing their ambitions, unlocked through possibilities of connected, innovative technology to grow, scale, and deliver the incredible customer outcomes. With a strong, authentic network across APAC and global tech community, he believes there has never been more exciting time to drive forward partnerships ecosystem, which is why Brian has established Hockey Stick. Welcome all. Thanks for joining us today from 2 parts of the world, Brisbane and Melbourne, this week. Well, a lot to discuss in a short amount of time. So let's maybe start with the first question. Maybe Lisa, given from your experience at Deloitte's innovation and venture national practices, how does product strategy influence design thinking, and how can it be effectively integrated in the product development process?
Oh, thanks, George. And look, to be honest, I could probably just keep talking on this one for our entire time together. But I'm so excited because I see that they are, and from my experience, they're inextricably linked. They influence each other, and there's a logic and a cohesion that's beautiful. But, you know, we're creatives here today and we're innovators on the call. So I'm going to ask you this question. Does this resonate? So have you ever been in the zone where you're really in a state of flow and you put a lot of time, energy, and effort into creating something that you're really proud of? You've done the hard yards and you got there, and then you deliver it and you present it to your manager, your customer, or your client, and they say, it's great, but it's not exactly what we're looking for. And like a balloon losing its air, you feel deflated and it can feel really defeating. And in my experience, design thinking can help us mitigate this risk by using a human-centered approach to producing the work for targeted results. But where do we start? And where do we, like, how do we build, or how do we know actually that we're building the right thing? And how do we choose to build one thing over another? And that's where the role I see of product strategy enables the development of a shared vision and aspiration for the product before we even start. So we challenge and we agree on strategic choices, which is critical for the product development and in-market success, in my experience. So this influences design thinking by aligning the business or the team on where they want to play and how they want to win, which is a key to a successful product strategy. But the business goals need to be understood to inform the goals of the product, and then aligned to market need and customer need in order to make effective design decisions. And so product strategy aligns us on where we're going, what problems the product we're developing will solve for, and for who and why. Whereas design thinking can help inform and deliver on that product strategy, in my experience, by really understanding our customers in our customers' target segment, the problems and challenges that they face, and inform our solutions in a human-centric way. So it's kind of almost, George, like design thinking influence product strategy by forming that human-centric foundation. And then if I think about it, design thinking influences in three key ways: fostering that deep understanding of product, customer needs and wants, but it refines the problem so that the human end users, that we understand that. And then we also focus on those problems to solve with our product. But then the second thing, I guess, is that design thinking tools enable us to ideate as many possible solutions to the problems and innovate and create various designs and specifications to explore, and then can help us prioritize on what's of importance to those customers based on the jobs to be done or the pain points. But I think probably the biggest influence is the discipline of prototyping early and conducting testing to gather insights, to learn and iterate as a strategic enabler. So I almost see like design thinking can act as a conduit between user needs and I guess product features by providing that toolkit and enable us to challenge those assumptions. But I guess from my experience, both during my time at Deloitte and also my entrepreneurial experience with a number of startups, is that a great product strategy has a focus on innovation, and it leverages design thinking methodology and frameworks to understand, identify, and then also assess the opportunities and give us the ability to tell that story and to tell the value of our product and what it will bring to market. So that's probably where I see the influences there. But then I guess, George, to answer your question around how design thinking can effectively be integrated into the product development process, the first thing, I guess, is shifting that mindset or that belief that some people hold that design thinking is not just for designers. Design thinking can be applied, in my opinion, in any industry, in any context where someone is trying to build a solution for a problem. So therefore, I think that design thinking can be a part of the whole product development process. But it really depends on, I guess, two key things. One is what level of abstraction is that overarching integration of design thinking. I've helped people organize at an organizational level, and that really is contextualized whether you're a corporate or whether you're a small to medium enterprise. But then also, is it a business unit or is it just a product development team? Or are you actually a solo pioneer in this world where you're trying to change? And so, you know, that's the real challenge, I guess. And using the lenses of the design thinking stages, I think, can be easier to view how you integrate those key points in the product design development process.
It doesn't, because it's a template, isn't it? That anyone can use, and particularly from what I've sort of overheard is very good for those who are not designers, that then they can feel that they're using something, special skills that designers have to implement in their businesses. I wanted to ask Angus if you have anything to add to this, given that you're pretty much using design thinking probably a lot. And maybe just to add, well, how much design thinking is used in products that you do every day? Do you use it all the time? Is that kind of like, this is what we do, this is how we do it, or you go outside of that process to kind of see, what other random stuff can come up from just not using it?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me today as well. And I do agree with what Lisa was saying there in the sense that design thinking doesn't have to be owned by designers just because it has that word design in the title. But I think especially when you look at the double diamond process, it's something that's embedded in many, many activities across product making. And usually it's kind of an intended, the intended outcome of the double diamond is usually to solve a problem. But it's also, I think, important for companies to focus on the outcome of alignment. So it's not just solving the problem, but using it internally to create alignment. If you're coming from a small startup and you're just on your own, maybe alignment's not a real thing for you. But if you have more than a couple of people, the more people involved, the more complex it gets. And that's when things can start to go in different directions. So I think design thinking in all types of product making, a lot of it is just about bringing everybody together to get them on the same page. So there's lots of different ways of achieving that alignment through design thinking tools. You can do all sorts of journey mapping, jobs to be done, which Lisa mentioned as well. I think the best way to create that alignment, though, is from talking to your customers and your end users. If you can get a whole team involved to spend that time with real people and talking about how things in their world work, things that you can help and innovate on, the sense of alignment just kind of happens really naturally. And that doesn't have to be part of a design process or a design thinking process. That can be spread all throughout. That could even make its way into strategy. That's a great way to start a strategy, is to start with talking to your customers and all getting on the same page. So I think design in general, sometimes we take over, sometimes we're the facilitators of all these things, but it doesn't have to be that way. I guess when design thinking and double diamond and all this sort of stuff was being, or first becoming popular, a lot of roles in product making didn't really exist back then. This was like 15 or 20 years ago. We have strategy roles and product marketing roles that weren't around back then so much. And a lot of those roles have taken on some of these activities and can facilitate these things. So I don't think it's all in our hands, but the whole idea of double diamond and design thinking has just become embedded in the culture of making things for people.
Yeah, and just to kind of expand more on that for you, Angus, as well, since I think you wanted to maybe touch base on Design Council, who actually pioneered the design thinking. They've changed a little bit of the Bible for, I guess, a product delivery. And how companies ensure the double diamond process is integrated seamlessly without without design taking over the entire process. So can design kind of exist outside of that kind of whole thing and not take the whole process?
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting point to look at too, that the whole process of design thinking, sometimes it's seen as gospel and it has to be done a certain way. But if you're focused on the outcomes that you want, you can adjust the process as you go. And I think a good signal that it needed adjusting was that the Design Council updated it recently. It's not just exactly as it was 15 or 20 years ago. It's become the systemic design framework, which looks at things a little bit differently. It kind of acknowledges that making products for people is an infinite game. You're always doing it. It's not one or two diamonds. It's an infinite number of diamonds. And there's so many complexities that can be involved into your problems that you're trying to solve, that the traditional method from 15 years ago, it wasn't the Bible. It doesn't have to be exactly as it was back then.
Yeah, we're getting diamonds and we're getting hearts from Lisa. Lisa, do you want to jump on this as well?
Everything Angus is saying really resonates. You know, we're talking about everyone being on the design page, on the same page. But what I love is that we're talking future focused skills too. As you said, there are roles that are emerging that is changing the landscape of how we work and who we work with, those emergent roles, and the future focus skills of what doesn't even exist yet. And I think the ubiquity of design and the ubiquity of our ability to apply design thinking methodology is such an exciting space. So yes, I'm just thumbing up because I love it.
Awesome. Well, it's good. It's good because people are maybe scared about what design thinking. Oh my God, I need to change my thinking, and it's design. And so it's not that scary, really. A lot of companies probably do these sort of things on day to day, just don't call it design thinking. But I wanted to introduce Brian into the conversation and see in which stages of the product development process do you see external partnerships playing the most critical role, especially in teams of providing specialized experience or resources? So where does this partnership sort of thing come, do you think?
Yeah, thanks, George. Thanks for having me.
When they should kind of start thinking about it and implementing.
Yeah, sure. Really loved Lisa's and Angus's points to sort of frame it up to go with it. I think sort of playing on building on top of Lisa's thoughts in particular. You know, in the design thinking of working out what does the customer need, what are you solving those problems for? The typical model is you build, buy, or partner, right? So if you're not at the stage of buying, you know, potentially around it. So when you're in the building and shaping that components, the questions you've got to ask yourselves is, are you going to build it all yourself, right? Are you actually going to provide? What I see where companies go wrong is they try and do too much for everything, right? And they promise the world and they say, oh yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Really deep feature sets, and they've got limited time, bandwidth, and resources to be actually able to fulfill that. So, you know, the elevator, you know, explanation of what you do and how you do it and what are you known for in particular, go really deep and make sure you can really solve those core problems for your customers. And through the design process, you need to think of, well, okay, well, if we don't do this ourselves, who can actually do that? So I think in the early stage, in the inception of design components, it actually comes into place of product partnerships in particular, George. So who else is going to provide that solution in hopefully an integrated way, which is also solving alongside the core problems of what we're enabling for our intended customers to have a better together narrative. And right now, if you think about every application you use on your phone, for yourself personally, day to day, week to week, month to month, but a lot of best of breed solutions out there are actually a combination of a multitude of services, whether they're white labeled, whether they're reselling a component of another application, whether it's an embedded technology which they're partnering with to do it. I think like the common knowledge which we all use and absorb today is Stripe, right? It powers so many payment platforms right now that through that technology and the SDKs which we're able to absorb, it often feels like the product, right? Every time you buy something on Shopify or BigCommerce, you're actually using Stripe under the hood or a version of around it. However, it means that Shopify is not building payments themselves, or BigCommerce or many others. I think Kogan used them as well. It looks and feels like the end component. It's still fulfilling the design of what they're aiming to do and solving the core problems, but it means that they don't have to go and build those components. And so in the same way, the analogy of I mentioned of we all have these applications on our phones, you need to be really clear around what do you build and own yourself and who do you bring in along that journey, to come back to Lisa's points around what are you solving for and what does that look like.
And this particularly would probably come first in a strategy as well, and then sort of seeing how to build the product. And Lisa, I wanted to go back to you and ask you, how can business benefit from integrating design thinking tools to ensure their product development is both problem driven and centered around the end user?
Look, thanks, George. It is a really, really interesting question. And I think Angus, apart from commenting on how design is wonderfully nonlinear, the other beautiful thing he said is it provides clarity. So if I think about one of the biggest business benefits, it's that business clarity. It's clearly articulating the why, the how, and the what of our product clearly in the narrative and the value that that story brings. And that becomes a cohesive logic, like you just said, George, from strategy through to product. And that cohesion between the business vision and then we help them deliver on that ambition through the products that we end up taking to market. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits. But when I think about the other more detailed business benefits around I get probably three. And the first one, I guess, is that design thinking, being solutions-based, encourages teams to really develop different design ideas and a number of them and a number of concepts, and not just build the first idea or the first one. And then being an iterative process, it can reduce uncertainty of concepts and prototypes by testing as early and as often as possible. And that helps us mitigate risk, and it also saves money because we're not building the wrong thing or we're not advancing in things and have to undo it and then we go. So it means that we can increase operational efficiency at the end of the day, but we also can ensure business spend is targeted. I think that the other key benefit is that you're human-centered, not necessarily product-centered. And I think design thinking really empathizes with the human end user, instead of maybe relying on quant data to inform a product design specifications. And so therefore design thinking enhances building a product that ends up resonating better with customers. And then when a business keeps focused on humans through that lens of design thinking, it understands more about how to deploy the capabilities and the tech in the organization and apply that to the product. So I guess in what I've seen in success is that businesses and also teams that fuse design thinking into product design and development processes, they can develop and they can build and they can deploy better user-centered products. But those products are going to meet the needs of customers more, and those customers are going to purchase. And ideally, they'll be retained and they'll purchase more over time and they'll become advocates of our product. And that equates to sales, right? And what does sales do? It makes happy entrepreneurs, happy bosses, happy businesses, because what we're doing as an employee, we have a better experience because it rolls up and it matters. So in my opinion, probably the biggest business benefit goes all the way to the bank.
Yeah, and growth.
100%.
Definitely. Being able to tell those stories then from customers and being able to explain the product through the useful features, everyday user that might want to sort of use it is very powerful. Definitely. In the context of design thinking, how can product teams improve their ability to effectively diverge and converge during the ideation and implementation process? Angus, now expanding from what Lisa just said.
Yeah, I think Lisa actually covered a lot of things already for that question, but I think some of the things you can dive in on there are finding a really deep insight, like a really compelling why on why you want to do this thing. What is it about these customers that is at the core of their need, and is that really compelling in your business? I think a way that we sometimes do this at Xero is to do a whole lot of research and a whole lot of spend a lot of time with customers, and then we ask ourselves the question, if we do this thing, how will it make a difference to the lives of these customers? And that's kind of a method of pulling ourselves out of all the mess that you sometimes end up with when you're going so deep, just to remind yourselves that you're not just solving this business problem, you're not just doing the thing you set out to do, you're making a difference to the lives of your customers by doing this thing. I think also, as part of a design thinking process, the idea of exploring multiple solutions is really important. And that's probably one of the things that a lot of teams get a little bit trapped into thinking that they need to solve it very quickly or solve it very with a very narrow focus. Sometimes you can really challenge a team to look beyond the role that they've been set up to achieve or the role that they've been hired into. And so that might mean thinking about if you're sort of a human-based, service-based business, that maybe you can think about solutions in terms of building something And you can also go the other way around. If you're a company that is constantly building, you can say, what if this was a service? What if we were a service? What if we're doing this a way that another company does this? Getting beyond your own DIY mentality too. So thinking that we always must build. Exactly as Brian was saying before, with the idea of partnering, you can look at partnering with other companies to build on top of what you've already done. These are all just different ways of exploring multiple solutions rather than jumping straight into, I am in this role, I must build and design and build this thing because that's my job. I think along with that too, it's really important to test multiple solutions as well. It's not just about deciding within your team which of those solutions is best. You can test multiple extremes with your customers and end users. And they don't even have to be things that you intend on releasing. They can be provocative solutions. They can be things that you know are too big, but you want to see the reaction from customers when they're too big or too little, or whatever it is, whatever extreme end that you're trying to test out. You can get a reaction from your customers and say, okay, this is not the direction that we should be going in.
Yeah, fantastic. And I would imagine you would do the sprints as well as part of design thinking. And for those who don't understand what the sprints are and how long they can be, because they could be a few days, a week, maybe longer. Do you mind just sort of touching base on explaining the sprints and how long they are usually in what you do?
Yeah, so I guess I'll explain how it typically works. The Google Venture Sprint was a 5-day sprint process that was created quite a few years ago. It's basically the whole end-to-end design thinking process. Instead of taking several months, it's shrunk down into a 5-day process. And the idea is to bring everybody in your team to block out a full week of their time so they're not focused on anything else other than this sprint. And the 5 stages of design thinking are the 5 days within the Google Sprint. And they can be really effective. They can take you into places that you never thought you'd go into. They can get everybody on the same page really, really quickly. The end result is a prototype or a couple of prototypes with an idea that ultimately solves the problem you were intending on focusing on from the beginning. I guess one of the things that's happened in a big organization like Xero, you can't really do design sprints all the time. There's just too many people involved. It's exhausting doing them multiple times. It can't be the only tool that you have to run through a design process. So there's lots of variations that can be doing it asynchronously. It can be doing the whole process more slowly. But then a lot of times it's just, you don't actually need to do a design sprint. You're just doing little bits and pieces to create clarity and alignment within your team. And that can be six weeks on research and then a day on prototyping. It can mix and match as much as you like.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Lisa agrees. Excellent. Going to ask people if they have any questions, please put them in a chat. We are just half an hour in and we'll conclude pretty shortly. Back to you, Brian. Once the product strategy has been defined using design thinking, what are the tips you can provide for maintaining partnership excellence during the implementation and scaling stages?
Yeah, sure. I think it comes down to, is it a partner where you're going to build the integration together? Who's going to do that work, right? So if it's something new, it's not out of the box. If it's not the case of absorbing APIs and clear documented components to fulfill a component, you need to be really tight on what it is and also what it isn't, right? So once that product strategy is bedded down, you want to make sure you deliver on it. You don't want a weak partnership or offering sort of pushing into your component, because you're straight away weak to customer experience. NPS is going to be terrible, and you're not really fulfilling the objectives of both what Lisa and Angus said earlier to go with it. So make sure you stay close to the process of what it is. Effectively, what you're doing is you're fulfilling feature gaps, which you've intentionally, strategically decided that you're not going to build out yourself, and you're looking for best of breed solutions to come alongside you. So it's a frictionless experience. So, what great looks like is if you're in your application or you're providing services or products per se, that if you are consuming or working with other partners to fulfill that, then it does look like, and it's very contextual, frictionless experience for the end user that they're carrying on and continuing. So you want to make sure if it's white labeled where possible, or single sign on, single sign in, or very easy components, and make sure that there's two directional information flow as a part of that around it. And so if you are using a number of partners to fulfill that, the product strategy of what you've got envisioned, that it does and is a very seamless process. And so we all know bad experience where you get kicked out of something and you can't log back in, you forget your password, or it looks different. You're like, hang on, this is a clunky crap experience. No one wants that. So I think the way that Lisa articulated early, bringing it all together, if you are using partners, do it properly, stay close to it.
Fantastic. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to add to about that we missed out, perhaps about design thinking? There's lots of components, a lot of things to consider, and different ways this could be done and organized. Anything in particular, the parts of design thinking that you're most passionate about that you want to share?
Because I'm off mute, I'll just carry on and say that speak to your customers. What other tools are they using today? How are they solving these problems right now? Are they using a combination of tools? Are they using a potential competitor? Find those early advocates, the champions, ask them around what it's doing. And also ask your potential partners, like what are their customers seeing as well. So the more information you can get to feed into that product strategy, then the more relevant, contextual, and you are really solving a core problem. The core problem which you think you might be solving in isolation and building whiteboard sessions and backslapping the team internally might be very different to what's for the customer. So it's important to go down that journey. And it's often not done enough. So if you lead with that, I think you're well placed for success. That's me. I'll pass over.
Yeah, and the people's needs change over time as well. So if you think that you've fixed one need, there's definitely different forces that get people to change that. Lisa and Angus?
I'd like to yes and on top of Angus's comment around design sprints. And the reason I'm doing that is because we talked about how to start to integrate design thinking. And we talked a lot about the what we do and the tools and the toolkit. But the second thing I think is critical to a focus area for success is changing the ways of working when you're trying to integrate the design thinking process. And I think that's essential. And I've seen that successful in very different levels of abstraction, but some things that are core and common is let's start early, start easy, and design sprints can be a wonderful way. I've seen some organizations even consider, 5-day great Google sprint. It's a beautiful experience. But considering how you shape the work, I've seen design sprints start off with just a couple of hours. And once again, the key thing is to make sure that you work with multidisciplinary teams across all the different business units and test also against the problem statements that are identified in the sprint when the team double clicks into the value proposition. But I think, that's wonderful when you've got a big business, but some of the innovators and creatives on the call today might be from a small to medium enterprise or might be a solo entrepreneur. And so that is where you have to potentially lean on your network. And I've played with a lot of startups where we go out on my back veranda and we'll have ideation sprints out there and look at how we can play. So get creative when you are cash strapped in that valley of death that you go through as a startup, but consider how you might also co-create with customers, test and learn with customers. As Brian and Angus both said, listening and understanding your customers, the rich insights and ideation that emerges is invaluable. Another key tool that you could consider that I've seen early success with is the DVF framework or the balanced brain breakthrough framework. And that's quite easy and palatable for organizations and teams to start using design thinking. It's really helpful because it helps us consider, evaluate, and also balance desirability, feasibility with the viability of a product. So that can be another nice tool if you're considering, how to start to play with design thinking.
Lisa, you mentioned something that potentially we haven't focused enough, and some people on this session might be sort of frightened, because design thinking usually in big corporations, big companies, but how does that apply to startups? And maybe Angus could kind of expand a little bit more on that, so that we kind of don't scare small businesses and startups that they should not use design thinking.
Yeah, I think actually a design thinking, or probably the Google Sprint in particular, is really, really suitable for startups. Especially when you're in a phase where you don't even know what your product is yet. It's just a thing. It's just a small idea. It gives you an opportunity to try something out really, really rapidly and have it fail as quickly as possible. I think in the larger organizations, often what you're doing is iterating on something that already exists, and you don't really need to reinvent everything that you've got. You're just making small versions of what you have. So I think if you're new to design thinking, a Google Sprint is such a good way to get into it and understand it. Usually the most impactful part of that is the final day, where you throw it in front of customers and have them completely reject what you thought was amazing, or have it, oh, I've been waiting for this my whole life, kind of thing. It can go either way, and that's really an amazing entry point into the whole world of design thinking and spending more time with customers and innovating in a space that you've never been in before.
Yeah, rejection is a beautiful way of moving forward in a way. We need to kind of get past that. And back in advertising, when I did it, we had this sort of the idea graveyard type of term, where, like all these beautiful ideas that we thought once would be amazing, the client just went, nah. And then we go back to the graveyard and pick it up if there's any other sort of opportunity to develop it further. But yeah, you need to sort of do a lot of different things and talk to your customers. That's definitely it. Well, thank you so much for today. If there's no questions from anybody else, I have not seen here pop up. There's a lot more to talk about this. It is a very good framework to use for small businesses, startups, and in larger organizations. Thanks to all of you for helping us talk a little bit more and get people hopefully into design thinking and how it can help their businesses. Thanks for your time, and thanks for everybody for coming today. We'll wrap it up here.